On a snow-covered railway platform, a young woman named Elara meets Kael, a mysterious stranger bound to a glowing spectral bird that bridges the living and the dead. Each midnight encounter unravels a curse woven from frost, memory, and fate. As the line between worlds blurs, Elara and Kael must uncover the truth hidden beneath the snow before it consumes them both. But in a world where time stands still and love defies winter's chill, can warmth survive the coldest curse? The snow fell heavily that night, soft flakes swirling in the chill air like tiny dancers caught in a slow, endless waltz. Elara pulled her coat tighter around her slender frame, the thick wool biting into her neck as she hurried along the deserted platform of the old railway station. Her boots crunched in the fresh snow, the sound sharp and crisp beneath the vast silence of the midnight hour. The wind cut like a knife, carrying with it the distant whistle of a train that was nowhere near yet somehow felt inevitable. She glanced at her watch. 5 minutes to midnight. The station was a forgotten place, a relic trapped in time, where the old iron benches wore layers of frost and the flickering lamps cast long shadows across the empty tracks. Elara had come here on a whim, drawn by a restless curiosity she couldn't quite name. Since the moment she first heard whispers about the stranger who appeared nightly with a spectral bird, something inside her had stirred a flicker of hope, or perhaps a longing she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Her breath came in small clouds as she paused near the edge of the platform, her eyes scanning the dimly lit expanse. That's when she saw him, a figure standing just beyond the reach of the station's pale glow, cloaked in shadows but unmistakably there. He was tall, his form steady and calm against the howling wind. On his gloved hand perched a bird unlike any she had ever seen, translucent, shimmering faintly with an ethereal blue light that danced along its delicate feathers. Elara's heart caught in her chest. The bird's eyes seemed to glow with an otherworldly intelligence, and it called out softly, a sound like the sigh of winter itself, both haunting and beautiful. The man's gaze lifted slowly, meeting hers across the snowy expanse. For a long moment, time seemed to hold its breath. The cold air hummed with an unspoken promise, and Elara felt a strange warmth bloom inside her, defying the chill. "You're here," the man said quietly, his voice low but clear, carrying a weight that made her shiver. "Yes," Elara replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I had to see." He nodded once, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. The bird fluttered its wings gently, releasing a soft glow that bathed them both in pale light. Elara stepped forward, the snow crunching beneath her feet, drawn as if by some invisible thread. "What is it?" she asked, her eyes locked on the spectral creature. "A messenger," he said simply, "and a guide." She breathed in deeply, the icy air filling her lungs as she stared at the mysterious bird and its keeper. In that stillness, the world beyond the station seemed to fade away, the cold, the loneliness, the endless winter nights. All that remained was the fragile connection between two strangers bound by something neither yet understood. As the distant echo of the midnight train began to grow, Elara felt a sudden surge of resolve. "I'll come back," she whispered, her promise carried away on the wind, mingling with the bird's soft call. The man inclined his head, and the bird spread its wings, the light pulsing gently as if in acknowledgement. Then, as the train's whistle pierced the night, Elara turned and walked away, her heart both heavy and hopeful. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the station in silence once more. But the promise of tomorrow lingered in the air, a whispered vow beneath the watchful eyes of the spectral messenger. As Elara disappeared into the night, the stranger remained, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the train had vanished. The bird nestled close to his gloved hand, its glow dimming but never fading entirely. Midnight had arrived, and with it, the beginning of a story written in frost and feathers. Whispered promises and winter longing to strangers whose fates were entwined beneath the frozen sky. And somewhere deep within the station's heart, the first spark of something extraordinary was kindled, waiting to grow. Elara's footsteps crunched softly against the freshly fallen snow as she approached the deserted railway platform, the cold night air wrapping around her like a silken shroud. The station was cloaked in silence, save for the whispering wind that swept through the skeletal framework of the iron and glass canopy above. Her breath formed fleeting clouds, ephemeral as the memories she tried to hold at bay. She paused, eyes adjusting to the dim glow of the lanterns struggling against the thick veil of winter's night. There, near the far edge of the platform, a figure stood still and solitary, a man draped in a worn coat, his gloved hand extended, cradling a faintly luminous bird. The creature's feathers shimmered with an otherworldly light, casting flickering shadows across his sharp features. Elara's heart quickened, an inexplicable pull drawing her closer. The stranger's gaze met hers, a flash of silver-grey eyes that seemed to pierce through the cold and into the depths of her soul. She swallowed hard, the icy air biting at her throat. But something steadied her nerves, a whisper of fate carried on the spectral bird's soft, haunting call. "Kael," he said, voice low and steady, the name slipping into the night as naturally as the snowfall. The sound was both a revelation and a question. "Elara," she replied, her voice barely more than a breath, yet it held a quiet strength. The space between them seemed charged, a fragile thread weaving them together in the frozen silence. They settled into a cautious rhythm, the cold seeping through their clothes, but failing to reach the warmth kindling between their words. Kael spoke first, his stories fragmented but laced with shadows, losses, hidden beneath layers of time, a curse hinted at, but not yet fully revealed. Elara listened, her own memories surfacing in waves of ache and hope. The bird, perched patiently on Kael's gloved hand, pulsed with a gentle light that seemed to respond to their unspoken emotions. It was as if the creature lived between realms, both messenger and guardian of their intertwined fates. "Why do you come here every night?" Elara asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Kael's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the faint glow of the midnight train's lights began to appear. "Because this place holds the key. To me, to you, to the burdened, to the promise we're bound by." Their conversation wove through the night, touching on fragments of past lives, whispered regrets, and fragile dreams. The station transformed from a cold, empty place into a sanctuary, an island suspended between worlds, where two souls found a tentative connection. The distant rumble of the approaching train stirred the air, a reminder that time was fleeting. The spectral bird's soft call grew more insistent, a melodic thread weaving through the stillness. Elara felt a surge of determination rise within her. "I'll come back," she whispered, her words a promise cast into the winter wind. Kael nodded, the faintest smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I'll be here." As the train's wheels screeched to a halt, the platform lights flickered, and the bird's glow waned to a gentle pulse. The moment lingered, a fragile bridge between what was and what could be. Elara turned away reluctantly, the promise of tomorrow wrapped tightly around her heart. The snow continued to fall, each flake a silent witness to the beginning of their shared story, whispered in the cold and carried on the wings of a spectral messenger. Their fates, once strangers in the night, were now bound by whispered secrets and the fragile hope of a dawn yet to come. The biting wind clawed at the edges of the snow-covered platform, whipping around the skeletal frame of the old railway station like a restless spirit. Elara pulled her coat tighter around her slender frame, the coarse fabric doing little to guard against the chill that seemed to seep from the very stones beneath her feet. She stood near the edge of the platform, her breath forming quick, frosty plumes that vanished into the night air. The station was deserted, except for one figure, Kael. He stood motionless beneath the dim glow of a lone lantern, his gaze fixed on the spectral bird perched silently upon his gloved hand. Elara's heart beat unevenly, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity stirring deep within her. Each night, the bird had appeared, its ghostly luminescence casting faint blue shadows in the snow. It was as if the creature belonged neither to this world nor the next, a silent messenger caught between realms. Tonight, Kael's expression was different, heavier, burdened by something unspoken. Gathering her courage, Elara stepped closer, the crunch of her boots on the frozen earth barely audible over the whisper of the wind. "Kael," she began softly, her voice barely above a breath, "what is that bird? Why does it come here?" He turned slowly, the pale light catching the sharp angles of his face. His eyes, dark and shadowed, held a flicker of something ancient, a sadness that seemed to stretch beyond the confines of this cold night. "It's not just a bird," he said quietly, voice rough like gravel. "It's a carrier of souls, those caught between life and death, waiting for release." Elara blinked, disbelief warring with the undeniable truth in his tone. The station felt suddenly more haunted, the silence thickening as snowflakes drifted down in slow, deliberate spirals. "Souls," she whispered, her gaze flickering to the spectral creature whose feathers shimmered like frost-kissed glass. Kael nodded, his gloved hand tightening gently around the bird's slender leg. "A curse binds it, and me, and perhaps even this place. We are all caught in this liminal space, prisoners of a fate we cannot yet understand." The words settled over Elara like a shroud. Her mind raced to piece together the fragments of mystery that had drawn her here, the loneliness that mirrored the station's isolation, the whispered promises she had yet to fulfill. The bird's soft call echoed again, a haunting melody that seemed to carry both sorrow and hope. She took a tentative step closer, feeling the frozen air prickling her skin. And what happens if the curse is never broken? Kael's gaze darkened, a shadow of pain flickering across his features. "Then we remain trapped, lost between worlds, our souls as frozen as the winter that holds us." Elara swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of determination ignited. "I don't want to be lost," she said, her voice steadier now. "Neither do you." He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time beyond the frost and shadows. "We must find a way," he murmured. Together, the bird fluttered its translucent wings, scattering a glittering frost that danced like tiny stars in the lantern's light. The station, once a place of waiting and silence, felt transformed, a threshold between past and future, despair and hope. Elara exhaled, her breath mingling with Kael's in the cold night air. "Then let us begin," she whispered, her promise hanging between them like a fragile thread of light. The snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, as the spectral messenger watched silently. Somewhere beyond the veil of frost and shadow, the first hints of dawn stirred. But for now, at this snowbound station, two strangers stood, united by a secret as ancient and fragile as the winter night itself. The hours slipped by unnoticed as they talked, voices low and careful, weaving together fragments of past and present. Kael's story unfolded like a fragile tapestry, a curse born of betrayal and loss, a bird bound to carry the restless souls of those ensnared by fate. Elara listened, sometimes disbelieving, often moved, her own fears and hopes mirroring the cold loneliness of the station. Between whispered promises and stolen glances, an unspoken understanding grew. They were no longer strangers caught in the same frozen moment, but companions bound by a shared destiny, fragile, tentative, and luminous beneath the shroud of winter's chill. As midnight edged toward dawn, the bird's soft song rose once more, a melody of sorrow and longing that wove through the swirling snowflakes. Elara felt a shiver that was not entirely from the cold, a stirring deep within her soul that whispered of secrets yet to be revealed. With a final glance at the spectral messenger, she pressed her gloved hand to her lips and whispered a vow, a promise to return, to unravel the curse, and to stand beside Kael in the long dark nights to come. The platform lay silent once more, save for the faint rustle of feathers and the echo of whispered promises carried away on the winter wind. The frozen secrets of the station had been unveiled, but their true story was only beginning. The cold air hung thick and still around the snowbound railway station, the powdery white blanket muffling the usual clatter and rush of trains long since ceased for the night. Elara pulled her coat tighter around her slender frame, the wool pressing snugly against her skin, but it did little to chase off the chill that settled deep into her bones. The lanterns along the platform cast pools of golden light that shimmered softly through the falling snowflakes, each one catching the glow like tiny stars drifting earthward. She perched on the edge of a weathered wooden bench, the paint peeling beneath a thin layer of frost. Across from her stood Kael, the stranger who had appeared with the spectral bird for 3 nights now, a figure as enigmatic as the midnight hour itself. His dark coat was dusted lightly with snow, and the faintest hint of warmth radiated from him, a fragile ember in the icy air. The translucent bird rested lightly on his gloved hand, its feathers shimmering like spun glass, catching the lantern light and fracturing it into a haunting glow. Tonight felt different. The usual distance, the cautious space they maintained between one another, seemed to waver like the flame of a candle threatened by a sudden gust. Elara's breath came out in soft clouds, and the faint sound of the bird's call, a delicate, haunting melody, lingered in the silence between them. "Do you ever dream, Kael?" Elara's voice broke the quiet, barely more than a whisper. "Not just about escaping this place, but about what comes after." Kael's grey eyes, so often guarded, softened with something almost like hope. "I do," he replied, his voice low and steady. "I dream of warmth, not just the kind that thaws the frost from my skin, but the kind that heals the parts of us we hide even from ourselves." Elara nodded, the ache of shared solitude threading through her chest. "Sometimes I'm afraid that the cold will freeze me inside, that I'll lose myself in the silence and snow." The bird stirred then, its wings unfurling like delicate frost patterns etched on glass. Its feathers caught the light, scattering tiny shards of ice into the air that hung suspended, sparkling like a constellation caught in a web. The frost seemed to swirl around them, tracing invisible lines that connected their fingertips, their breaths, their whispered confessions. "It feels like the station itself is listening," Elara murmured, eyes wide as the ethereal frost glimmered in the dim light. Kael reached out slowly, hesitating for a heartbeat before his hand brushed against hers. The touch was electric, a whisper of warmth against the cold, and the frost clung to their skin as though sealing an unspoken vow. The spectral bird let out a soft, melodic trill, its song weaving through the air like a silken thread binding their hearts. "This place is more than just a station," Kael said, voice thick with meaning. It's a threshold, a space where the past and future collide, where hope and longing dance in the shadows. Elara's gaze drifted to the bird, watching as it fluttered its ghostly wings once more, leaving faint trails of frost that lingered like whispered promises. The snow continued to fall silently around them, the world reduced to the soft glow of lantern light and the fragile connection growing between two lost souls. "Then let's not be afraid to dream," Elara whispered back. "Not here, not now." Kael smiled, a rare and genuine curve of his lips that warmed the winter night. Together, they sat beneath the canopy of stars obscured by snow clouds, their hearts beating in quiet rhythm as the spectral bird hovered between them, a bridge of feathers and frost that spoke of destinies entwined and the promise of something new. Outside, the wind stirred, carrying with it the faintest echo of whispers, ghostly voices borne on the winter air, weaving through the station like a song only they could hear. The boundaries between what was real and what was possible blurred, and in that liminal space, hope took root. The night stretched on, endless and soft, a canvas painted with frost and feathers, longing and light. And as Elara and Kael shared dreams and fears beneath the watchful gaze of the spectral bird, the station ceased to be just a place of waiting. It became a sanctuary where two souls dared to believe in the warmth beyond the cold. Their fingers intertwined, the frost melting into the promise of spring yet to come, and the birds' silent wings beat a rhythm that echoed deep within their hearts. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and secrets, but for the first time in a long while, Elara felt a sparker fragile, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, the winter would not last forever. And as the clock neared midnight, the bird's call softened, a lullaby for the lost and the longing, a whispered promise carried on the cold wind that some bonds, forged in frost and feather, were meant to endure beyond the darkest nights. But even as they rose to leave, the question lingered in the icy air. How far were they willing to follow this strange messenger, and what truths awaited beyond the frozen veil? The station held its breath, waiting with them. The wind had been whispering warnings all evening, but Elara had ignored them, her focus fixed on the verge of midnight and the promise of seeing Kael again. The snow began as a soft cascade, delicate flakes drifting like feathers from the darkened sky, but within minutes, the gentle fall transformed into a furious storm, a swirling tempest that whipped through the empty platforms of the railway station. Elara stood just beyond the rusted iron benches, her breath visible in the frigid air, the cold biting at her cheeks despite the layers wrapped around her. She pulled her scarf tighter, eyes searching the dim glow of the station clock. The late train was overdue, an uncommon event in this sleepy town, but tonight the storm had other plans. From the shadowed edge of the platform, Kael emerged, his silhouette framed by the pale light of the frosted lamps. The spectral bird rested on his gloved hand, its feathers shimmering faintly despite the dark. As he approached, the bird let out a soft, haunting call that seemed to vibrate in Elara's chest. "The storm's worse than they said," Elara murmured, voice barely audible over the rising howl of the wind. Kael nodded, his eyes reflecting the swirling snow. The train won't be coming any time soon. They moved toward the small waiting shelter, a weather-beaten wooden structure with frosted windows and a heavy door that creaked open to reveal the dim interior. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp wood and cold stone. There was a solitary bench, and they sat side by side, the warmth of their shared space a fragile comfort against the storm raging outside. The spectral bird perched quietly on the bench's edge, its ethereal glow casting flickering shadows that danced across the peeling paint. Elara watched the creature with a mixture of wonder and unease. It was as if the bird carried the weight of the snow and the silence itself. "You never told me why you come here," Kael said softly, breaking the silence. "Not fully." Elara swallowed, her fingers curling into the fabric of her coat. "I suppose I'm running from something. From the cold that settled in my heart." Kael's gaze darkened, but a flicker of understanding passed between them. "I know that cold well. It's not just the winter outside. It's the winter we carry inside us." The bird gave a low, melodic call, echoing through the shelter like a whispered secret. Elara felt the sound settle deep within her, stirring memories she hadn't dared to face. "What brought you here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kael hesitated, then spoke of shadows of a past marked by loss and regret, of a curse entwined with the spectral bird that tethered his fate to the station and to her. Each word was a fragile thread, weaving a tapestry of pain and hope between them. Outside, the storm raged with relentless fury, snowdrifts piling high against the station's weathered walls. The howling wind carried the bird's calls, mournful and urgent, as if heralding a secret yet to be revealed. Elara reached out, her hand brushing against Kael's. The contact was electric, a spark of warmth amid the encroaching cold. "We're not alone in this," she whispered. Kael's eyes met hers, steady and fierce. "No, and together, maybe we can find a way beyond the frost." Hours passed unnoticed as the storm held them captive. Outside, the world was a blur of white and shadow. Inside, two souls began to thaw, their whispered promises weaving a fragile hope against the long night. As the first faint light of dawn threatened the horizon, the spectral bird stretched its wings and took flight, vanishing into the swirling snow. Its final call lingered, a haunting melody of farewell and promise. Elara and Kael rose from the bench, their breaths mingling in the cold morning air. The storm had passed, but the echoes of midnight remained etched in the snow, in their hearts, and in the whispered promises that would guide them forward. "Tomorrow night," Elara said, her voice steady, "we meet again." Kael nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. Until then, the bird watchers. Together, they stepped out into the quiet morning, the station bathed in a fragile new light, the weight of solitude lifted by the warmth they found in each other's presence. But beneath the fragile peace, the unanswered questions lingered. What secret did the spectral bird still hold? And how deep did the frostbound curse run? The journey was just beginning. The cold bit into Elara's cheeks as she stepped onto the snow-covered platform, the midnight wind carrying whispers through the hollowed skeleton of the abandoned station. The faint glow emanating from Kael's gloved hand was the only source of light besides the distant flicker of an aging lantern. The spectral bird perched silently, its translucent feathers shimmering softly, catching the moonlight like shards of glass. Kael's voice, low and steady, broke the silence. "This bird," he began, his eyes never leaving the ethereal creature, "is more than it seems. It is a messenger between worlds, between the living and the lost." Ilara's breath hitched. The idea was fantastical, yet the palpable energy surrounding the bird made disbelief impossible. "Between worlds," she echoed, stepping closer, the snow crunching beneath her boots. Kael nodded, his gaze somber. "Long ago, a curse was cast upon it, a curse that bound the souls of those trapped in limbo, waiting for release. The bird carries their messages, their hopes, and their longing. It waits for those destined to set them free." The spectral bird stirred, spreading its ghostly wings with an almost imperceptible flutter. A faint frost traced the air, delicate patterns forming and dissolving like whispered secrets. Elara reached out tentatively, fingers brushing the icy feathers. A chill ran up her arm, not unpleasant but profound, as if the bird's essence seeped into her very being. "Why us?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you think we're connected to this?" Kael's eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. "Because our fates are intertwined with the curse. Our meeting is no accident. It is the convergence of destinies. We have been chosen to unravel this mystery together, to break the bonds that hold the lost souls captive." The weight of his words settled between them like the snowflakes drifting from the sky, silent, inevitable, and pure. Elara's heart thrummed with a mixture of fear and hope. The lonely nights at the station, the spectral birds' haunting calls, the whispered promises, they all pointed toward a truth greater than herself. "Then we have to keep the promise," Elara said, her voice steadying with newfound resolve. "We have to find a way to free them." Kael's lips curved into a faint smile, the first sign of warmth since their meeting. "Together," he affirmed. The bird let out a soft, melodic call, a sound that seemed to echo through the frozen night, weaving into the howling wind and settling in the space between two souls bound by fate. The station, once a place of desolation, now felt like a sacred threshold, liminal space where worlds merged and destinies were forged. As the minutes slipped by, they spoke in hushed tones, sharing fragments of knowledge and dreams. The bird remained vigilant, its silent wings beating a steady rhythm that matched the pulse of the night. Every whispered promise was a thread weaving the tapestry of their shared journey, fragile yet unbreakable. Elara's mind raced with questions, but beneath them lay a steady current of certainty. This was the path she was meant to walk, alongside Kael and the spectral messenger. The chilling winter no longer felt like an enemy, but a companion, its frost a reminder of the delicate balance between despair and hope. The station clock chimed softly, the sound muffled by the falling snow. They both knew the midnight train would not arrive tonight, but it didn't matter. Their journey had already begun. As the bird stretched its wings once more, casting flickering patterns of frost on the platform, Elara and Kael stood side by side, silent witnesses to the quiet magic unfolding around them. The whispered promises hung in the cold air like stars waiting to be claimed. "Tomorrow night," Kael said finally, "we learn more." Elara nodded, the spark of determination alight in her eyes. "Tomorrow night," she echoed, and beneath the watchful gaze of the spectral bird, the frozen world seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next chapter of a story written in frost and feathers. The snow fell with a relentless insistence, blanketing the station in a thick, muffling silence that seemed to swallow the world whole. Elara pulled her coat tighter around her slender frame, the cold seeping through even the thickest layers of wool and leather. Her breath came out in ragged plumes, swirling and vanishing into the frosty night air. The lanterns flickered weakly, their golden light swallowed by the heavy curtain of snowflakes that swept across the platform. She could barely see Kael, but she knew he was there just a few feet away. A shadow among shadows, his spectral bird perched silently on his gloved hand. They had met here night after night, drawn together by the strange bird and the mysteries it carried. Tonight felt different. The cold wasn't just a physical presence, it was a weight inside her chest, a gnawing fear she could no longer hold at bay. Elara swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet Kael's gaze. His grey eyes, intense and unreadable, seemed to hold the winter itself within their depths. "Kael," she began, her voice barely more than a whisper, carried away almost immediately by the howling wind. "I'm afraid," afraid that if I stay here too long, if I keep coming back, I'll lose myself. The cold, it's like it's trying to take me, to erase who I am. Kael's expression softened, the ghost of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He shifted closer, the spectral bird emitting a faint glow that painted his features in pale blue light. "You're not alone in that fear," he said quietly. "I've felt it too. The darkness isn't just outside, it lives inside me." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of the snow and the bird's soft, haunting call. Elara's heart pounded in her chest, the vulnerability in her words hanging in the cold air like fragile glass. "Tell me," she urged gently, "about your past. What haunts you, Kael?" He hesitated, then began to speak, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of years spent in shadow. His story was one of loss and regret, of a curse that bound him to the spectral bird and the endless winter they both seemed trapped within. As he spoke, Elara saw the pain etched into every word, the loneliness that had brought him to this forsaken station night after night. The bird fluttered its translucent wings, the soft light from its feathers casting eerie patterns on the snow around them. It was as if the creature was binding their stories together, bridging the gap between two souls caught in the same frozen limbo. "I've been running from it," Kael confessed, "but here, with you, I feel like maybe I don't have to run anymore." Elara reached out, brushing her gloved fingers against his, a spark of warmth amidst the biting cold. The snow swirled around them, thickening, but inside the small shelter of the platform, a fragile warmth began to take root, warmth born of shared pain, whispered promises, and the fragile hope that maybe, together, they could thaw the winter that gripped their hearts. The spectral bird let out a soft, plaintive call, echoing through the quiet night like a promise that they were not alone, that their fates were entwined, and that even in the darkest winter, light could be found. "Stay with me," Elara said, her voice steady now, "not just here at the station, but through whatever comes next." Kael's eyes met hers, and in that gaze was a silent vow, a whispered promise carried on the wings of the spectral bird. The cold night held its breath, waiting to see if those promises would be kept. As the snow continued to fall, thick and unyielding, two souls found a fragile connection amidst the frosted beacon of hope in a world that seemed lost to winter's relentless grasp. But as dawn approached, the question lingered in the icy air. Could they truly trust each other enough to face the darkness that awaited beyond the snowbound platform? The answer, like the bird's haunting call, was just beyond reach, waiting to be discovered in the nights to come. The cold bit sharply at Elara's cheeks as she stepped onto the frozen lake's glassy surface. The world around her was muted, the heavy silence of winter blanketing the landscape in a hush that felt almost sacred. Her breath came in soft plumes, dissolving quickly into the crisp air. Above her, the spectral bird circled gracefully, its translucent feathers catching the pale moonlight and scattering it like shards of ice. It was the same bird she had seen the night before at the station, its ethereal presence both haunting and comforting. As a child, Elara had often wandered the outskirts of her small village during winter, drawn inexplicably to the cold and the quiet it brought. Memories fluttered like fragile snowflakes in her mind, her mother's gentle voice calling her inside as dusk fell, the crackle of the hearth fire, the soft rustle of frosted leaves. But beneath those tender moments lay a gnawing loneliness, a sense of something lost beyond reach. The spectral bird had appeared in those childhood memories too, a silent guardian perched on the frosted windowpane as she clutched a faded photograph of a smiling man she barely remembered. Her father, meanwhile, far from the lake and the village that Elara called home. Kael stood on the edge of a rooftop overlooking a city wrapped in its own winter embrace. Snow drifted down in lazy spirals, settling on darkened streets and the rooftops of shuttered buildings. The air was heavy with the scent of cold stone and distant smoke. Kael's gaze was fixed on the spectral bird resting lightly on his gloved hand. Its ghostly light cast shifting shadows across his face, revealing the tension beneath his calm exterior. Kael's memories were a labyrinth of frost and shadow. He remembered nights spent wandering beneath street lamps that flickered through the falling snow, searching for something he could not name. The bird had been his only companion during those desolate hours, a flicker of warmth in the biting cold. It had guided him through blizzards, leading him toward places where the frozen earth whispered secrets. One night, the bird's wings had stirred the snowflakes so fiercely that it seemed as if the stars themselves had fallen to earth, lighting a path toward a distant horizon shimmering with promise. The two lives, separated by miles and shaped by solitude, were entwined in ways neither fully understood. The spectral bird was a thread weaving their stories together, a messenger from a realm between worlds. As Elara traced her fingers over the worn photograph, she felt the weight of unspoken memories pressing against her heart. Kael, below the pale city sky, tightened his grip on the bird's delicate form, the chill of his past melting slowly in the warmth of newfound purpose. In the quiet moments between their waking and dreaming, both Elara and Kael sensed the pull of destiny drawing them closer. The frostbitten memories that had once chilled their souls now glimmered with the possibility of connection. The bird's haunting song echoed in their minds, a melody threaded with loss, longing, and the promise of redemption. Elara's thoughts drifted back to the station where they had met. The snow-covered platforms felt less like a place of waiting and more like a threshold between worlds. With each breath, the cold seemed less oppressive, replaced by a fragile hope that thawed the ice around her heart. She whispered a promise into the night, a vow to confront the shadows of her past and embrace the uncertain future waiting beyond the snow. Kael's perspective shifted to the present moment, standing once more beneath the swirling snow. The bird lifted from his hand, its wings spreading wide as it ascended into the dark sky. Its light flickered like a beacon, calling him forward. He knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but the memories that had once frozen him in place now fueled a quiet determination. Whatever awaited them at the end of this path, he was ready to face it, with Elara beside him. As the chapter closed, the spectral bird's glow lingered in the cold air, a silent promise that the past and present were forever intertwined. The frost-bitten memories, once sources of pain and isolation, had transformed into the foundation of a bond stronger than winter's chill. And in the stillness of the snowbound night, two souls prepared to write the next chapter of their story together. The wind stirred, carrying with it the soft murmur of the bird's haunting song. Elara and Kael exchanged a glance that spoke volumes, a wordless understanding that their shared fate was only just beginning. The snowflakes swirled, blurring the line between memory and reality, and as the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, they stepped forward into the unknown. And so, beneath the watchful eyes of the spectral messenger, the frozen past gave way to the fragile warmth of connection, a warmth that promised to endure long after the last snow had melted. The cold night air wrapped the snowbound railway station in a silence so profound it felt almost sacred. The platform, dusted with fresh snow, glistened faintly under the pale light of the moon, which hung low and heavy in the sky like a guardian watching over the lonely stretch of tracks. Elara stood at the edge of the platform, her breath clouding in the frozen air, heart pounding in rhythm with the soft, almost imperceptible flutter of wings. There, perched delicately on Kael's gloved hand, was the spectral bird, its feathers shimmering with an ethereal glow that seemed to pulse gently in the darkness. Without a word, the bird lifted its head, and from its translucent beak emerged a melody so haunting, so achingly beautiful, that it seemed to reach into the very depths of Elara's soul. The notes drifted on the wind, soft and sorrowful, weaving through the cold like a whispered secret meant only for her. Her eyes widened as a flood of memories, long buried beneath layers of frost and silence, began to unfurl within her mind. Faces, places, feelings she thought lost forever, stirred like embers beneath the snow. Kael's gaze remained steady on the bird, his expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, his eyes closed, and the weight of the melody pressed against his chest, loosening the tight grip of old pain. He remembered now, fragments of a past shadowed by regret and longing, moments of joy and loss intertwined like the delicate frost patterns on the platform's iron railings. The bird's song was more than music. It was a message, a call bridging worlds and hearts. Elara shifted closer to Kael, the warmth of his presence a faint contrast against the biting cold. The bird's song seemed to pulse between them, a silent thread binding their fates tighter with each note. "Do you hear it?" she whispered, her voice trembling not from cold, but from the rawness of the moment. Kael nodded slowly, eyes still closed. "It's telling us something, something we need to understand." The snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting like fragile promises from the dark sky. Around them, the station remained hushed, as if holding its breath. The bird's melody faded into a delicate silence, leaving behind a lingering sense of both loss and hope. Elara's hand found Kael's gloved fingers, their touch tentative but electric. "We can't stay here," she said, voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. "Whatever this is, whatever it means, it's calling us beyond the station." Kael opened his eyes, meeting hers with a fierce determination that mirrored her own. "Then we follow, together." With that, the spectral bird stretched its ghostly wings and lifted into the night air. Its feathers caught the silver light, scattering tiny shards of frost that twinkled like stars as it soared ahead. Elara and Kael took their first steps off the platform, leaving behind the familiar cold and silence for a journey into the unknown. The melody still echoed faintly in their minds, a haunting song woven from winter longing, spectral whispers, and promises yet to be fulfilled. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since the snow began to fall, they faced it not as strangers but as intertwined souls bound by a secret only the bird could sing. And so, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon and the silent chorus of the night, Elara and Kael began to follow the bird's song, stepping into a future shaped by hope, mystery, and the fragile beauty of a connection that defied the frost. The wind carried the last notes of the spectral bird's song into the darkness, leaving behind a question that hung in the cold air. Where would the melody lead them next? They didn't yet know, but they were ready to find out. The night was a tapestry of silver and shadow as Elara pulled her coat tighter against the biting wind that swept across the snow-draped platforms of the deserted railway station. The clock's hands hovered just shy of midnight, its steady ticking the only sound besides the soft whistle of the frosty air. She stood motionless, heart thrumming with a mix of dread and something more fragile hope. Across the platform, Kael's figure emerged from the darkness, his presence as steady and enigmatic as the spectral bird that perched silently upon his gloved hand. Elara's breath caught as their eyes met, a flicker of unspoken understanding passing between them. The bird, its feathers, shimmering faintly with an ethereal glow, let out a soft, haunting call that seemed to ripple through the stillness like a whispered secret. It was a sound that tugged at something deep within them both, a call that spoke of fate and promises whispered beneath the cloak of winter's quiet embrace. Kael's voice was low, almost reverent as he spoke. "It's time," she nodded, the weight of the moment settling around them like fresh snow. The station, once a place of waiting and isolation, now felt like a threshold, a boundary between the known and the unknown, between the past they carried and the future they dared to seek together. Without another word, the spectral bird stretched its ghostly wings and lifted into the air, its glow casting dancing shadows across the snow. It moved with purpose, guiding them beyond the flickering lamplight of the station and into the vast whiteness of the winter night. The forest loomed ahead, dark and silent save for the gentle rustle of snow-laden branches. Elara swallowed her fear, the cold prickling her skin but failing to dim the fire that had begun to kindle in her chest. Kael's steady presence beside her was both anchor and flame, a paradox that made her heart ache with the promise of something real and fragile. As they stepped onto the snowy path illuminated by the bird's shimmering light, Elara glanced at Kael. "Do you think we can break free of this? The curse? The waiting?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kael's gaze was steady, filled with a quiet determination that mirrored her own. "We have to, together." Their hands brushed, a fleeting touch that spoke volumes, a silent promise forged in the cold air. Stronger than any spoken vow, around them the night seemed to hold its breath, the spectral bird's song weaving through the trees like a thread connecting their souls. The journey into the unknown had begun. Each step away from the station was a step toward a new story, one they would write together amid the frost and the whispers of winter longing. The path was uncertain, the future veiled in shadow and snow, but Elara no longer faced it alone. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they walked side by side, the spectral bird leading the way with its silent wings and glowing feathers. And somewhere deep inside, amidst the cold and the silence, a whispered promise blossomed, a promise of hope, of love, and of a fate shared beneath the frozen sky. The station faded behind them, a place of endings now transformed into the beginning of everything. As the midnight hour waned, the bird's calls echoed softly, carrying them forward into the unknown, into a world where whispered promises were destined to be fulfilled. And so, with hearts entwined and courage kindled, Elara and Kael crossed the threshold, leaving behind the past and stepping into the future together. The biting wind whipped across the snow-laden landscape as Elara tightened the scarf wrapped snugly around her neck. The faint glow of the spectral bird ahead was the only beacon in the vast, white wilderness stretching endlessly under the pale moonlight. She glanced sideways at Kael, who moved with a purposeful calm, his eyes fixed on the ethereal creature guiding their path. The platform of the station was far behind them now, a fading memory swallowed by the cold embrace of the night. Elara's boots crunched rhythmically against the crisp snow, each step leaving a fleeting imprint soon softened by the gentle fall of powdery flakes. Her breath formed small clouds that dispersed into the still air, mingling with Kael's in a quiet, shared rhythm. The silence between them was comfortable, an unspoken acknowledgement of the journey unfolding, both outward into the winter wilderness, and inward into the fragile spaces of their hearts. Kael's voice broke the hush. "Look there," he said softly, pointing toward a towering tree rimed with frost. Its branches stretched like frozen fingers against the night sky, and etched deep into its bark were strange markings that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Elara stepped closer, her gloved fingers tracing the intricate symbols. A shiver ran through her, not from the cold, but from a sudden, inexplicable recognition. "These markings, they feel familiar," she whispered, eyes locked on the ancient script. Kael nodded, his gaze intense. "They speak of bindings and broken promises, a history tied to the bird and to us." The spectral bird fluttered silently from Kael's hand to a nearby branch, its feathers glowing softly against the dark wood. Its presence seemed to pulse with a quiet urgency, as if urging them onward. Their journey carried them deeper into the wilderness, the snow stretching out like a blank canvas beneath the stars. At the edge of a frozen lake, the surface gleamed like glass, reflecting the constellations that flickered overhead. Here, Elara and Kael paused, their shared solitude deepening into something tender and unspoken. Elara's eyes met Kael's, and for a moment the chill of the night softened. The warmth of their breath mingled visibly in the cold air, their proximity embalmed the loneliness that had shadowed their pasts. The bird watched quietly from its perch, a sentinel in the stillness. "Do you ever wonder," Elara began hesitantly, "if this, all of this, was meant to bring us together?" Kael's smile was faint but genuine. "I do, more than I ever thought I would." As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of soft gold and pink, the pair reached a ridge overlooking the endless expanse of snow. The rising sun's warmth was muted but unmistakable, a promise that even the coldest winters must end. They stood side by side, the spectral bird hovering briefly before disappearing into the morning light. Elara squeezed Kael's hand, a silent vow passing between them to face the unknown, to unravel the mysteries binding their fates, and to find hope amidst the frozen horizons. The journey was far from over, but in that fragile moment, beneath the awakening sky, Elara and Kael found a spark that neither frost nor shadow could extinguish. And as they turned back toward the path ahead, the whispered promise lingered in the crisp air. Whatever awaited them beyond the snow, they would face it together. The night hung heavy over the snowbound railway station, its silence broken only by the soft whisper of the cold wind weaving through the deserted platforms. Elara's breath formed small clouds as she pulled her scarf tighter against the biting chill, her eyes scanning the familiar yet otherworldly surroundings. Beside her, Kael stood still, the spectral bird perched silently on his gloved hand, its faint glow casting an eerie light on the frost-kissed ground. A sudden shift in the air made Elara shiver not from cold, but from the palpable change that settled around them. It was as if the very essence of the station breathed a new story into existence. And then, from the swirling snow and mist, they came, ghostly apparitions, faint and flickering, their forms barely distinguishable from the drifting flakes. The ethereal figures moved with a mournful grace, eyes blurred but filled with a sorrow that pierced the winter night. Elara's heart quickened, a mixture of awe and dread rooting her to the spot. "Kael," she whispered, reaching out instinctively. "What are they?" Kael's gaze never wavered from the spectral shadows, the echoes of those bound by the curse. He said softly, "Their souls trapped in the cold between worlds, waiting for release." The bird took flight, circling above the apparitions as if guiding them, its ghostly wings stirring the snowflakes into a slow dance. The air filled with whispered voices, fragments of stories long forgotten, but now stirring to life in the frozen night. Elara and Kael watched as the apparitions began to reenact a silent scene to figures. Lovers torn apart by betrayal and sacrifice, their hands reaching yet unable to touch. The scene played out with heartbreaking clarity, the raw emotion pressing down on Elara's chest like a winter storm. This is the origin," Kael murmured, his voice thick with pain. The tragedy that cursed the bird and, by extension, us. Questions flooded Elara's mind. How could their meeting be anything but fate? How could they not be connected to this sorrow that seemed etched into the snow and whispered by the wind? Kael knelt, his fingers tracing symbols etched faintly in frost along the platform's edge, ancient runes that pulsed with a soft, icy light. These are the keys, he explained. Clues left by those who came before, meant for the ones who would finally break the curse. Elara crouched beside him, her eyes narrowing as she studied the cryptic shapes. The whispers grew louder, words in a forgotten language weaving around them like a spectral melody. She felt the weight of generations pressing down, but also a fierce determination rising within her. "We have to understand this," she said, voice steady despite the cold. "If we don't, no one will be free." Together, they pieced the clues together, their alternating perspectives revealing nuances in the runes and the whispered messages. Each revelation brought them closer, their shared purpose knitting their hearts in a fragile but unbreakable bond. The apparitions gradually faded with the first light of dawn, the snow softening beneath its gentle touch. Elara and Kael stood, hands brushing as they rose, a silent vow passing between them. The curse would be broken together. Yet, as the spectral bird vanished into the pale morning sky, a lingering shadow remained, a reminder that the path ahead was fraught with danger and sacrifice. Their fates were intertwined not just by love, but by the haunting past that awaited resolution. Elara looked toward Kael, her eyes bright with resolve and hope. "We face this together," she said. Kael nodded, his gaze steady and warm. "No matter the cost." The snow continued to fall softly, covering the tracks and footprints alike. But beneath the winter's silence, a new story was beginning, one of courage, redemption, and the whispered promise of freedom. As the station slowly came alive with the first stirrings of dawn, the spectral shadows retreated, but their message remained clear. The past was not finished with them yet. The curse awaited its reckoning, and Elara and Kael were the key to its end. The night had offered them a glimpse into the depths of sorrow and the heights of hope. And now, armed with knowledge in each other, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever the winter still held. The spectral bird song echoed faintly on the wind, a haunting melody that promised both peril and salvation. The dance of shadows had begun, and Elara and Kael were at its heart. Would they be strong enough to break the curse before it consumed them? The answer lay hidden beneath the frost and whispers, waiting to be unveiled. Their journey was far from over. The whitening world around the snowbound railway station was a quiet sanctuary under a moonlit sky. The air crisp and laden with the scent of pine and frost. Beneath a canopy of ancient trees, their branches heavy with icy crystals, Elara and Kael found themselves drawn away from the cold emptiness of the platform. Here, in this secluded alcove, the spectral bird perched silently between them, its feathers glowing softly like embers caught in a winter breeze. Elara's breath came out in gentle puffs, mingling with the swirling snowflakes that danced like silver whispers in the air. The stillness was profound, broken only by the soft rustle of the bird's ethereal wings. She pulled her coat tighter, the fabric rough against her skin, but the chill seemed less biting here, softened by the strange, fragile closeness that had blossomed between her and Kael in the days since their midnight meetings began. Kael's gaze was steady, yet distant, as if weighing the weight of the moment. His gloved hand moved slightly, the spectral bird shifting its position, but never taking flight. The light from its glowing feathers bathed his face in a ghostly hue, revealing the subtle tremors of emotion beneath his composed exterior. "Elara," he began, voice low and hesitant, There's something I need to tell you, something I've kept locked away for too long." She looked up, eyes wide but calm, inviting him to speak. The snow settled around them like a silken veil, muffling the world beyond their fragile bubble. Kael inhaled deeply, the cold air filling his lungs, before unburdening a truth that had haunted him like the relentless winter winds. The curse tied to the bird, it isn't just a story. It's my burden, and perhaps yours too. For years I've been trapped here, bound by memories and promises I cannot break alone. Elara's eyes softened with understanding, her fingers brushing the frost-laden branch above them. "I've been afraid," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid that if I let myself feel, I'll be lost in the cold forever. But now, hearing you, I realize I don't want to be alone anymore." The bird's eyes shimmered, reflecting their shared vulnerability, and it let out a faint, melodic call, a sound that seemed to stitch their hearts together in the quiet night. "We don't have to face this alone," Kael said, his tone steadying with newfound resolve. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Elara nodded, a tear escaping to trail down her cheek, glistening like a shard of ice. "Whispered promises," she murmured, echoing the motif that had woven through their story. "They're stronger than we think." They sat in companionable silence, the cold pressing in around them, but unable to touch the warmth growing between their joined hands. Above, the frosted branches shimmered under the moon's gaze, as if blessing their fragile pact. The night stretched on, each moment a thread in the tapestry of their unfolding story, a tale of winter longing, spectral messengers, and whispered promises that neither time nor frost could sever. As the first faint light of dawn crept across the horizon, Elara and Kael rose, their breath mingling in the chilled air like a silent vow. The spectral bird lifted from its perch, circling once above them before disappearing into the pale sky, its mission far from over. Together, beneath the awakening sky, they stepped forward, hearts bared, destinies entwined, ready to face whatever mysteries the winter night still held. The whispered truths shared beneath the frosted trees had forged a bond neither could deny. And as the station awaited their return, a new chapter began, one written not in solitude, but in the shared warmth of hope and trust. Yet, as the snowflakes continued their silent descent, a lingering question hovered between them. How much would they sacrifice to break the curse, and was their fragile love strong enough to survive the storm ahead? The answers whispered on the wind, waiting for the next midnight to reveal their secrets. The wind howled through the skeletal branches of the pine trees, her breath surrounding the station in the cold air, carrying with it a biting chill that seeped into Elara's bones. Her voice steady, she stood beneath the frosted she felt inside, the snow settling softly on her shoulders. "It's more than just a story," whispered among the shadows. Beside her, Kael's gloved hand cradled the spectral bird in ways I never imagined. Its ghostly feathers shimmering faintly in the pale moonlight, his gaze fixed the bird's eyes perched deep pools of luminous white. "I've carried this burden longer with an unspoken urgency," as he replied softly. "But until now, I never believed the curse could be broken. I thought it was our fate to remain trapped like the souls the bird carries, forever waiting, never free." The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged with shared understanding. Elara glanced down at her hands, the tips numb from the cold, and then back up at Kael. "We have to try," she whispered, the words of fragile lifeline thrown across the gulf of uncertainty. Kael's eyes softened, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Then let's make a pact," he said, reaching out. His hand was warm beneath her fingers, grounding her as the snow swirled around them like whispered promises. They clasped hands, the contact sparking a current of electricity that seemed to thaw the frost lining their hearts. The spectral bird stirred, its feathers ruffling as a soft glow pulsed from within. It emitted a low, almost melodic, call an ancient song that resonated deep within the winter night. Together, Elara vowed, her voice firm, "We'll find a way to end this, for us and for the souls trapped in this endless winter." Kael squeezed her hand gently, no matter the cost. They stepped back towards the abandoned shelter in the station, their footprints the only marks in the untouched snow. Inside, the dim light from a lone lantern flickered against frost-covered windows, casting dancing shadows on the cracked wooden walls. Elara rested her palm against the icy glass, tracing the delicate patterns as if they might reveal some hidden truth. "The curse," Kael began, voice low and grave, "was born from a betrayal and ancient wrong that tethered the spirits to this place. The bird carries their souls, caught between life and death, waiting for release." Elara listened intently, the weight of his words settling over her like the snow outside. "And us? How do we fit into this?" Kael looked at her with eyes that held both pain and hope. "Our meeting wasn't chance. The curse chose us, bound together by the same threads that hold the bird. If we break it, we break the chains, not just for ourselves, but for all those lost souls." A quiet resolve bloomed within Elara's chest, warming the cold that had long gripped her heart. "Then we face it whatever comes." The bird took flight suddenly, its ethereal wings stirring the stale air as it circled above them. Its call echoed through the station, a haunting melody that seemed to weave their fates tighter with each note. Outside, the snow began to fall heavier, blanketing the world in pure white. Elara and Kael stepped into the swirling storm, their hands still entwined, hearts beating in unison. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and sacrifice, but in that moment they were no longer alone. Whispered promises faded into the night. Carried on the wings of the spectral messenger a vow that the frozen pact they forged would be the key to a new dawn. As the first light of morning threatened the horizon, Elara looked to Kael, a question lingering in her eyes. "Are we truly ready to face what lies ahead?" Kael's smile was steady, unwavering. "We have to be, for us, and for all the souls waiting for their freedom." And with that, they stepped forward together into the cold embrace of winter's final test. The storm had come without warning, a sudden, furious tempest that swallowed the stars and turned the night to swirling white chaos. Elara tightened the collar of her coat, her fingers numb despite the thick gloves, and glanced sideways at Kael. His jaw was clenched, his sharp eyes scanning the snow-choked landscape ahead, but even his usual calm seemed frayed. The spectral bird, perched silently on his glove, was a flicker of ghostly light, its feathers shining like shards of ice under the pale moonlight, a fragile beacon in the tempest. "We shouldn't have come this far," Elara breathed, voice nearly lost in the howl of the wind. Her boots skidded on the ice hidden beneath fresh snow, each step a gamble. "Maybe we should turn back." Kael shook his head, his dark hair whipping across his face. "Not yet. The bird is leading us. We're close." His words, though steady, did little to calm the knot of fear tightening in her chest. The winter's bite was merciless, seeping through layers of wool and leather, but it was the unknown that chilled her bones the most. The curse, the bird, the fate they shared. It all felt as fragile as the icy feathers that glimmered in the fleeting moonlight. Suddenly, Elara's foot slipped on a hidden patch of ice. She stumbled forward, a gasp caught in her throat as Kael's hand shot out, catching her wrist with firm, sure strength. Their eyes met hers wide with shock, his steady and searching. The world narrowed to that breathless moment, the pounding of their hearts, the crackle of cold air, the ghostly shimmer of the bird's wings. "Careful," he murmured, voice low and rough. "I won't let you fall." A blush crept up Elara's cheeks, despite the cold. The vulnerability of the moment hung between them, fragile as glass. She swallowed hard, the storm's fury muffled by the sudden warmth rising in her chest. They pressed on, the silence between them thick with unspoken fears and tentative hope. The spectral bird fluttered its wings softly, a sound like the faintest chime of ice against stone, guiding their steps through the blizzard's wrath. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of white and cold, until they reached a small clearing, shielded from the worst of the wind by ancient frosted trees. Elara sank to the snow-covered ground, exhaustion weighing her down. Tears pricked at her eyes, not from the cold, but from the raw ache inside. "I'm scared," she whispered, voice cracking. "Scared I'll lose myself in all this, the cold, the loneliness." Kael sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His gaze softened, shadows of his own haunted past flickering in his eyes. "I understand," he said quietly, "but you're not alone. Not anymore." Slowly, Elara reached out, her hand trembling as it found his. Their fingers entwined, a silent promise amid the frost-bitten night. The spectral bird stirred, its feathers catching the moonlight in a dazzling display of icy shards that seemed to dance just for them. In that moment, the storm outside faded to a distant roar, eclipsed by the fragile warmth blossoming between two souls tethered by fate and the whispered promises they dared to make. The shards of ice weren't just cold, they were beautiful. Sharp reminders of the hardships they must face together, and the strength they could find in each other's arms. But as the night stretched on, the question lingered in the biting air. Could love truly thaw the deepest winter, or would the shards of their fears fracture the fragile bond they'd forged? With the bird's silent guidance and their hearts aligned against the cold, Elara and Kael braced for the trials yet to come, aware that the next step might demand everything they had and more. The storm was not over, and neither was their journey. Elara pulled her scarf tighter against the biting wind, her fingers numb beneath the layers of wool. The snow had settled in thick drifts around the station, the world outside reduced to a monochrome of white and shadow. Yet, despite the cold, her heart stirred with a restless heat she could neither quell nor fully understand. She glanced toward the edge of the platform, where Kael stood waiting, the spectral bird perched silently on his gloved hand. The bird's feathers fluttered faintly, stirring a whisper of frost that mingled with the chill in the air. "You came," Kael said quietly, voice low and roughened by cold. "I promised," Elara replied, voice barely more than a breath. They stood close enough now that the warmth radiating from their bodies seemed to push back the cold. Their eyes flicked to the spectral bird, whose translucent wings glimmered with a delicate frost, then back to each other. As they prepared to face the unknown, the fragile embers beneath the snow promised that even in the coldest winters, warmth could be found and love could bloom where least expected. But as their fingers lingered, a distant sound cut through the night, a faint, haunting call carried on the wind. The bird's eyes flicked toward the horizon, its feathers ruffling with sudden urgency. Elara and Kael exchanged a glance heavy with unspoken questions. The faint glow from the creature cast a pale light that flickered against the falling snowflakes, making the air between them shimmer with an otherworldly magic. Kael's eyes met hers, dark and searching beneath thick lashes, and a flicker of something unspoken passed between them, an ember of connection as fragile and persistent as the winter fire she longed to kindle. He stepped closer, boots crunching softly on the frost-bitten gravel, and Elara felt her breath catch in her throat. The moment teetered on the edge of something new. a fragile hope wrapped in hesitation. Kael extended his gloved hand towards the bird, and Elara reached out instinctively. Their fingers brushed, a spark igniting beneath the layers of fabric that sent a trembling warmth coursing through her. The bird stirred, flapping its wings with a soundless flutter that scattered faint ice crystals into the air, swirling like embers caught beneath a blanket of snow. In that instant, the cold seemed to retreat, replaced by a tender heat that settled deep within her chest. Elara's pulse quickened, her nerves alive with a mingling of fear and desire. Kael's gaze softened, his usual guarded expression melting away as he watched her with an intensity that made her feel both vulnerable and fiercely alive. "I've been waiting for this," Kael admitted, voice low and steady, "for a connection that isn't just shadow and silence." Elara swallowed, the words resonating within her like a whispered promise. "So have I," she whispered back, her voice trembling with the weight of longing that had built within her during these long, lonely nights. As a sudden gust of wind swept across the platform, snowflakes whipped around them in a swirling dance. They instinctively moved closer, seeking shelter beneath the eaves of the station's old wooden canopy. The cold nipped at their faces, but the closeness between them offered a sanctuary far warmer than any coat or scarf. Kael reached out, tucking a stray lock of hair behind Elara's ear with a careful tenderness that made her heart flutter. His fingers lingered, tracing a path along her jawline before resting lightly on her cheek. The gesture was intimate, a silent vow whispered in the stillness of the night. Elara closed her eyes, savoring the sensation, the delicate heat of his touch against the frost. The spectral bird perched calmly nearby, its ghostly eyes reflecting the flicker of hope blossoming between them. "What happens now?" she asked softly, opening her eyes to meet his. Kael smiled, a rare and genuine expression that lit his features. "Now we see where this warmth can take us." They stood together beneath the star-studded sky, the snow falling softly around them, a quiet promise lingering in the air. The embers of their connection glowed steadily, defying the chill of the winter night, setting the stage for a journey neither of them could yet fully comprehend. Elara's heart beat in time with the spectral bird's silent rhythm, a melody of hope and whispered longing that echoed through the stillness. The night was far from over, and the path ahead held secrets yet to be revealed. With hearts alight and spirits entwined, they stepped forward together, the embers beneath the snow lighting their way into the unknown. The station lay cloaked in a hush that seemed beyond the mere absence of sound. Snow fell like whispered secrets, each flake dissolving softly on the icy platform, weaving a tapestry of white that blurred the edges of the world. Elara sat quietly, the wooden bench beneath her cold and unyielding. Yet the warmth of Kael's presence beside her seeped through the layers of wool and leather that separated them from the chill. On Kael's gloved hand perched the spectral bird, its feathers shimmering faintly under the pale light of the half-moon, a silent sentinel watching over the frozen tableau. Their breaths mingled in the crisp night air, small clouds of vapor that dissolved quickly into the vast stillness. Neither spoke at first, the weight of unspoken thoughts hanging between them like the heavy, snow-laden branches arching overhead. Elara's eyes traced the soft glow of the bird's ethereal feathers, the creature's luminous form seeming to pulse with quiet life, a heartbeat in the snow. She thought back to that first night, how the cold had bit deep through her coat and the wind had whispered around the empty platforms. She had arrived just before midnight, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and curiosity. And there, standing with the bird perched silently on his gloved hand, was Kael. Their eyes had met briefly, an electric current passing through the frost-bitten air, binding them in that instant. She had whispered a promise to return, a fragile vow carried on the wings of winter longing. Now, as the snow continued its gentle descent, Ilara's mind drifted through the moments that had followed, their conversations, the shared stories and secrets, the way the bird had become a bridge between their worlds. She remembered the soft call of the spectral messenger, a haunting melody that stirred something deep within her, a signal that their fates were entwined beyond mere chance. Kael's gaze was steady, his stormy eyes reflecting the pale light of the moon. From his perspective, the burden of the curse that bound him and the bird was ever present, a weight that pressed upon his soul with relentless gravity. Yet, in Elara's presence, that weight seemed to lighten, the cold shadows of his past retreating just enough to allow the faintest glimmer of hope to flicker. He thought of the whispered promises exchanged between them, words spoken in hushed tones beneath the watchful stars, promises that had become anchors in the shifting tides of their journey. The bird's silent watch was a constant reminder, not just of the curse, but of the possibility of freedom, of a future unbound by the chains of fate. The distant rumble of the approaching midnight train broke the stillness, its sound muffled by the thick blanket of snow. The station seemed suspended in time, the world outside blurred and softened by the falling flakes. Elara felt the steady beat of her heart, a rhythm that matched the quiet flutter of the bird's wings. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, their hands inched closer together. Fingers brushed, tentative and trembling with the fragile hope of something new, a connection forged not just by shared hardship, but by the delicate promise of love and trust. The cold air was sharp against their skin, but within that moment, warmth blossomed like a fragile flame, defying the frozen night. They did not speak, for words felt inadequate to capture the depth of feeling that passed silently between them. Instead, they sat wrapped in the quiet embrace of the snowbound station, two souls caught in a moment that stretched beyond time itself. The spectral bird lifted its wings briefly, a soft glow illuminating the space between them, as if blessing the union of their hearts and destinies. As the train pulled into the station, its lights cutting through the wintry haze, Elara and Kael rose together. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and the unknown. But in this frozen moment, they found strength in each other. The whispered promises of the past had crystallized into a vow, unspoken yet understood, a pledge to face whatever came, side by side. The station faded behind them as they stepped forward into the night, the spectral bird soaring silently above, a guardian of their intertwined fate. Time, for now, was still, but the future awaited, shimmering with the fragile light of hope and the fierce warmth of a love born in the heart of winter. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint crunch of snow beneath Ilara's boots as she followed Kael through the dense forest bordering the railway station. The spectral bird glided just ahead, its ghostly feathers glowing softly like a lantern guiding them through the darkness. The moon hung low, casting silver light that shimmered on the frosted branches, and the cold bit deep into Ilara's cheeks, painting them a rosy hue. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Elara whispered, her breath forming tiny clouds that dissolved swiftly into the frigid air. Kael glanced back, his dark eyes luminous in the moonlight. "The bird has never led us astray. We're close now." The forest began to thin, and soon they emerged into a hidden glade, a secret cradle of winter untouched by time. Towering pines encircled the clearing, their branches heavy with snow that sparkled like crystals under the ghostly light. The air was still, save for a faint melody, the spectral bird's haunting song, weaving through the trees with an ethereal quality that sent shivers down Elara's spine. At the glade's center, The snow lay undisturbed except for a swirling mist that hovered just above the ground. It pulsed with a cold energy, a living breath of winter itself. As Elara and Kael stepped closer, the mist thickened, coalescing into a form both terrifying and mesmerizing. A shadowy figure, its edges blurred like smoke caught in a frozen wind. "You have come," the figure's voice crackled like breaking ice, reverberating through the clearing. "Bound by fate, entwined by the curse you seek to unravel." Elara's heart hammered in her chest. The stories Kael had told, fragments of an ancient curse linked to the spectral bird, two souls trapped between worlds, all converged here in this moment. Yet beneath the fear, a fierce determination warmed her veins. Kael stepped forward, his voice steady despite the chill that seemed to emanate from the figure. "We do not fear you. We seek only to free what has been bound for too long." The shadowy figure shifted, its form flickering like a candle's flame in the wind. "To break the curse, you must offer what you hold most dear." Elara's gaze met Kael's, the unspoken question passing between them. What price were they willing to pay? Taking a deep breath, Elara reached out her gloved hand and clasped Kael's. The warmth between them was a stark contrast to the biting cold, a beacon of hope in the frozen world. The spectral bird fluttered its wings, its luminous feathers casting dancing patterns on the snow as it sang a melody both sorrowful and sweet. "We offer our hearts," Elara whispered, "and our trust." The shadowy figure recoiled, then slowly began to dissolve, the swirling mist dissipating into tendrils of sparkling frost. The glade brightened, the oppressive cold lifting as dawn's first light painted the horizon in soft pinks and golds. The spectral bird took flight, soaring upward in a graceful arc, its glow intensifying before fading into the morning sky. Elara and Kael stood hand in hand, the weight of the curse lifted, replaced by a fragile yet fierce hope. "It's over," Kael murmured, his voice thick with relief. Elara nodded, tears freezing on her lashes. "Or perhaps it's just the beginning." As the sun crested the snow-covered trees, the railway station awaited them, no longer a place of cold isolation, but a threshold to a future shaped by love, trust, and whispered promises fulfilled. Their hearts, once bound by fate and frost, were now free to take flight. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the faint crackle of frost melting beneath their boots. Ilara's fingers tingled as she reached out to grasp Kael's hand, the touch grounding her amidst the swirling uncertainty. Around them, the glade lay bathed in the pale light of a full moon, snowflakes drifting lazily like fractured stars on a breathless night. Kael's eyes held a flicker of something new, a fragile hope as he squeezed Elara's hand gently. "Are you sure you're ready?" he asked, his voice low but steady, carrying the weight of countless nights spent in shadowed waiting. Elara nodded, her breath forming a mist that mingled with the frosty air. "I am. We've carried this burden long enough. It's time to break free." The spectral bird, perched on Kael's gloved hand, shifted its luminous feathers, its glow intensifying until the entire clearing seemed to pulse with ethereal light. The bird's haunting call a soft, melodic trill echoed through the stillness, a sound both chilling and beautiful, like a whispered secret carried on the wind. Together they began to speak, their voices weaving a tapestry of whispered promises and earnest vows. Elara's words trembled at first, laden with vulnerability. "I promise to trust, to stand with you beyond fear and doubt." Kael answered, his voice growing stronger with each breath, "And I promise to face whatever comes with you at my side." As their words intertwined, the light around the bird swirled and expanded, casting shimmering patterns on the snow-covered ground. The cold wind picked up suddenly, circling them in a dance of frost and warmth, carrying with it faint echoes fragments of the curse unraveling, loosening its grip like ice melting beneath the first rays of dawn. A sudden rush of power coursed through the glade, and the spectral bird spread its wings wide, the translucent feathers glowing with a brilliance that rivaled the moon itself. With a graceful leap, it took flight, the light trailing behind like a comet's tail, scattering feathers that drifted softly down, settling like snowflakes on Elara's outstretched palm. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming sense of release. The bird's mission was complete. The future stretched out like an uncharted horizon, vast and uncertain, but no longer shadowed by the weight of the past. Hand in hand, Elara and Kael stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever dawn awaited them beyond the ice. Its purpose fulfilled, Kael pulled her close, his breath mingling with hers in the crisp night air. "We did it," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "We're free." Elara leaned into him, the cold no longer biting at her skin, but fading like a distant memory. Around them, the glade seemed to breathe with new life, a promise of spring hidden within the heart of winter. In that moment, the long nights filled with longing and whispered secrets gave way to spoken vows and shared dreams. The curse had been broken, but their journey was only beginning, a path illuminated by trust, love, and the warmth that comes from facing the unknown together. Yet even as the last feather faded into the night, a question lingered unspoken between them: what awaited beyond this newfound freedom? The horizon was a canvas of soft pastels, pinks, and golds bleeding into the pale blue of early dawn. The snow that had cloaked the world in silence and stillness for so long now began to lose its grip. Tiny rivulets of water tracing delicate paths down the platform's worn wooden boards. Elara stood beside Kael, the chill of the night still lingering in the air, but slowly retreating under the gentle caress of morning light. Their breaths mingled in visible clouds, small plumes of warmth against the fragile cold. Elara's fingers brushed against Kael's, tentative at first, then with growing confidence, as if the simple contact could melt away the last remnants of winter that clung to their souls. Kael's pale eyes, so often shadowed by uncertainty and guarded pain, now held a softness that mirrored the dawn's glow. The spectral bird, their silent companion through nights thick with snow and whispered promises, perched on Kael's gloved hand. Its feathers shimmered faintly, catching the early light like a prism, scattering tiny rainbows into the awakening world. Elara watched, breath held, as the bird's form began to waver not with the fragility of death, but with the lightness of release. A soft, haunting call escaped its beak, a melody that seemed to echo the journey they had shared, the pain, the hope, the fragile threads of connection woven through the coldest nights. Then, as if carried by the first warm breeze of spring, the spectral form dissolved into a single white feather that floated gently down, landing on the frost-thawed ground between them. Elara bent to pick it up, the feather soft and weightless in her palm. It was more than a keepsake. It was a testament. The curse that had bound Kael and the bird was broken, their fates no longer shackled to shadows and sorrow. The feather was a promise of freedom, of love, of a future unburdened by the past. Together they stepped into the station. The once desolate building was transformed by the dawn's light, windows casting shards of sunshine like scattered jewels across the floor. The cold air was replaced by a gentle warmth that seemed to seep into the very walls, dispelling the long winter's grip. Elara turned to Kael, a tentative smile playing on her lips. "It's over," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief and something deeper hope. Kael nodded, his hand finding hers with a quiet strength. Over, he agreed, and just beginning. Outside, the snow continued to melt, the world awakening from its frozen slumber. The railway station, once a place of waiting and loss, now stood as a beacon of new beginnings. And as Elara and Kael faced the future hand in hand, the feather lay between them, a symbol of the love and light that had emerged from the heart of winter. But even as they embraced the promise of dawn, the faintest whisper seemed to linger in the air, a reminder that some journeys, though finished, leave traces that will forever color the path ahead. The train's whistle echoed softly in the distance, a call to move forward. And with hearts unburdened and spirits entwined, Elara and Kael stepped toward whatever awaited beyond the horizon, ready to face it together. The end of the night was the beginning of everything. The sun climbed higher, warming the platform until the last frost melted away, pooling in shimmering puddles that mirrored the clear blue sky. Elara and Kael lingered a moment longer, reluctant to leave the place that had been both a prison and a sanctuary. Yet the station no longer felt cold or empty. It was alive with memories and the quiet hum of hope. Kael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He handed it to Elara with a shy smile. It was a train ticket, not for departure, but for a new journey they would take together, no longer bound by curses or solitude. Elara's eyes shone as she tucked the ticket safely away. "To wherever the tracks lead," she said softly. "Together," Kael replied, squeezing her hand. As they walked away from the station, the feather still clutched in Elara's palm. The world around them seemed to breathe with possibility. Winter's grip had loosened, and in its place blossomed the fragile warmth of love, newly found and fiercely held. The spectral bird's mission was complete. But Elara and Kael's story, their story, was only just beginning. The first light of dawn spilled softly through the sheer curtains, painting the room in pale gold and muted blush. Elara sat by the window, her fingers tracing the faint frost patterns that still clung stubbornly to the glass, remnants of a night's chill that winter had reluctantly released. Across the room, Kael stirred the embers of the wood stove, coaxing warmth back into the small space that had become their refugian island of solace, carved out from the vast thawing wilderness beyond. Elara's gaze drifted to the sketchbook lying open on the table. The delicate lines of the spectral bird they had come to know so well were drawn with a careful reverence, each feather imbued with whispers of the past. She touched the page gently, as if the paper might carry the echo of the bird's haunting song. Kael noticed and smiled, his eyes softening with an affection that had grown steadily since those first midnight meetings at the station. "You've captured it beautifully," he said, settling beside her with a worn journal in hand, "like it's still alive here." She returned his smile, a quiet warmth blooming within her chest. "It's more than just a bird now. It's a part of us, of everything we've been through." Kael nodded, flipping through the pages of the journal. "These stories, these memories, they're the threads that weave us together. I want to remember them all, to learn from them." Their voices mingled in the room, weaving a tapestry of shared experiences and hopes. The past, once a heavy shroud of mystery and pain, was now a foundation for the future they dared to imagine, a future where whispered promises transformed into spoken vows, and silent longing blossomed into open love. Outside, the world was changing. Patches of earth thawed beneath melting snow, revealing tender shoots of grass and the first brave wildflowers of spring. The cold that had once defined their nights was retreating, replaced by the gentle promise of renewal. Elara felt it in her bones, the echo of winter's grip loosening, the weight of solitude lifting with every shared breath between them. Their days began to fill with simple rituals that grounded them in their new life. Morning walks through the awakening forest, hands intertwined against the crisp air. Evenings spent reading by firelight, voices low and steady as they unraveled the mysteries still lingering in the shadows. They packed away remnants of their time at the station feathers, notes, trinkets sealing them in a wooden box that felt both like an ending and a beginning. One afternoon, as rain drummed softly against the window panes, Elara and Kael sat wrapped in a shared blanket, the room bathed in the gentle grey light of a soft spring shower. They spoke of dreams once shelved beneath fear and uncertainty, now rekindled by the courage they had found in each other. "Do you think we'll ever forget the bird?" Elara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kael shook his head, his hand finding hers in the quiet. "No, but I think it's moved on. It's done its work, brought us together, freed us in a way. Now it's time for us to live, not just remember." There was a profound peace in his words, a certainty that steadied the fluttering hope in her heart. Together they would face whatever came next, no longer as strangers bound by spectral curses and whispered promises, but as partners building a life from the fragile beauty of new beginnings. As the days lengthened and the city around them stirred with renewed life, Elara and Kael found joy in the ordinary moments, sharing laughter over steaming cups of tea in bustling cafes, exploring quiet corners of the city that felt untouched by winter's harshness. Their love was no longer a secret whispered in the dark, but a bright flame burning openly, a beacon through the lingering shadows. Evenings often found them on the balcony of their modest apartment, where the thawed landscape stretched beneath an endless sky. They would stand side by side, hands entwined, watching as the sun set in a blaze of pink and amber, the last traces of snow melting into the earth. In those moments, the future felt limitless, an unwritten story waiting to be told. Yet, beneath the warmth of their newfound life, questions remained. How would they navigate the challenges of blending their past with their shared future? What remnants of winter's cold might still lurk in their hearts? But for now, those uncertainties were shadows on the edges of their vision, distant and dim compared to the radiance of the present. Elara leaned her head against Kael's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her cheek. "Whatever comes," she murmured, "we face it together." He kissed the top of her head, a soft promise sealed in the quiet air. Together, and as the stars began to pierce the twilight, their whispered vow carried on the breeze of promise, not just to each other, but to the life they were ready to live. A life born from frost and feather, from longing and light, from the delicate balance of winter's end and spring's embrace. The station, the bird, the cursed, they were all part of their story, but no longer the whole. Now, Elara and Kael stepped forward into the dawn of their new beginning, hearts open and intertwined, ready to write the chapters yet to come. The station was quiet, save for the soft crunching of snow beneath their boots and the occasional distant whistle of a wind that seemed to carry secrets along its frosty breath. Elara and Kael sat side by side on the bench beneath the faded iron canopy, the spectral bird perched silently on Kael's gloved hand, its feathers shimmering faintly in the moonlight. The bird's soft calls wove through the night air, a subtle melody that only they seemed to understand. Elara's fingers trembled slightly as she reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The cold had seeped into her bones, but the warmth radiating from Kael beside her was an anchor, steadying her in the swirling uncertainty that had become her life. "Do you ever wonder," she began softly, "if this is all just some fleeting dream?" Kael's gaze flickered towards her, eyes reflecting the pale light like twin stars caught in a winter sky. "I think about that every night," he admitted, voice low and steady. "But then the bird calls, and I remember the promises we made, the whispers beneath the snow." Elara smiled, a fragile curve that held the weight of countless untold stories. "Whispered promises," she echoed. "It sounds like something from a fairy tale, but somehow it feels real." They had met in the cold silence of midnight, two strangers drawn by the spectral bird that seemed to carry the weight of their intertwined fates. Each night since, their meetings had unfolded layers of guarded truths and quiet hopes, their alternating perspectives revealing the depths of their longing and the shadows that clung to their pasts. Now, as the world around them held its breath beneath a blanket of snow, those whispered promises felt like a lifeline, fragile yet unbreakable. "I was afraid once," Kael confessed, "that I would never find a way to break free from the curse that binds the burdened, by extension, us. But now, sitting here with you, I believe that together we can rewrite the story." Elara's heart stirred at his words, hope blossoming amid the frost. "Together," she agreed, her voice barely more than a breath. The bird shifted on Kael's hand, its ghostly wings fluttering softly, scattering faint traces of frost into the air. The moment felt suspended in time, a delicate balance between the past they could not change and the future they dared to imagine. Later, they found refuge in a small cabin near the station, its worn wooden walls offering shelter from the biting wind. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows that played across the room and softened the edges of reality. Elara sat by the window, tracing icy patterns on the glass with her fingertips, each swirl a silent testament to her fears and hopes. Kael watched her quietly, the unspoken ache in his eyes mirroring her own. "You don't have to be afraid," he said gently. "Not with me." She turned to face him, vulnerability laid bare in the depths of her gaze. "It's hard," she admitted, "to let someone in after so much cold and silence. But with you, it feels different. Like maybe I'm not alone anymore." He reached out, covering her hand with his, their skin meeting in a warmth that defied the winter chill. "We're not alone," Kael promised. "Not now, not ever." Outside, the night deepened, the spectral bird's call rising and falling like a whispered lullaby. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the cabin, scattering a few stray feathers across the floor. Elara and Kael instinctively clasped hands, the gesture a silent reaffirmation of their bond. The birds' soft cries seemed to echo their resolve, carrying their whispered promises beyond the walls of the cabin and into the vast, snow-covered landscape. It was a song of hope, a testament to the power of connection forged in the crucible of winter longing. As dawn began to break, pale light spilled through the frost-laced window panes, casting long shadows across the room. Elara and Kael rose together, stepping outside to the station platform where the first rays of sunlight touched the snow, melting some of its harshness and revealing the promise of a new day. They stood side by side, eyes fixed on the horizon where winter's grip was slowly loosening. The bird took flight, its wings tracing a path of shimmering light against the awakening sky, though the journey ahead remained uncertain. Elara and Kael were ready to face it, together bound by whispered promises, strengthened by shared vulnerability, and buoyed by the unyielding hope that had blossomed between them. The echoes of their promises lingered in the crisp morning air, a melody that would guide them through whatever storms awaited. And as the spectral bird vanished into the distance, its soft call faded into a silent vow. This was only the beginning. But beneath the surface of newfound hope, a question remained unspoken. weighing on their hearts like the last chill of winter. How long could their fragile bond withstand the coming trials? And what sacrifices would they be called to make to keep their whispered promises alive? The answer, like the bird's haunting song, was waiting to be discovered in the shadows of the snow. The morning light seeped softly through the frosted windows of the railway station, casting a golden glow across the melting snow that pooled in uneven patches around the platform. Elara stood beside Kael, her breath forming delicate clouds in the crisp air. The cold no longer biting but gentle, like a fading memory. The world around them was waking from its long slumber, the icy grasp of winter loosening with every warm ray that caressed the earth. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, not the heavy silence of uncertainty, but a quiet filled with unspoken understanding. Elara's fingers found Kael's, their hands fitting together as naturally as the thawing snow slipping into a stream. The spectral bird that had once haunted the station and their dreams was gone, its mission complete, leaving behind only a single white feather that rested in Elara's palm like a fragile talisman. "It's over," Kael murmured, his voice low and steady, eyes tracing the slow dance of the melting ice. Elara nodded, a slow smile curving her lips. "Not over," she said softly, "just beginning." They began to walk, each step sending ripples through the puddles beneath their feet, reflections of sky and sun merging in the water. The platform, once a place of cold isolation, now shimmered with the warm promise of renewal. Around them, the world stretched open like a blank page, waiting for the story they would write together. The scent of earth, damp and alive, drifted on a gentle breeze that stirred the branches overhead, where the first green buds of spring peeked shyly through the remnants of frost. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang a clear, joyful melody that broke the silence of the winter that had passed. It was a song of hope, of new beginnings, echoing the quiet joy that bloomed in Alira's chest. "Do you think the bird will ever come back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kael squeezed her hand, a soft laugh escaping him. "Maybe, but this time it won't be a messenger of fate or curse. It'll be a friend, a reminder of how far we've come." They paused at the edge of the platform, the snow now nothing more than memories clinging to the cracks and crevices of the weathered wood. Elara breathed in deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs with the crispness of freedom. She glanced at Kael, whose eyes held a quiet strength and something she hadn't dared to hope for before peace. "We made it," she said, the words carrying the weight of everything they had endured. Together, Kael confirmed, his gaze steady and warm. The seasons had changed outside, but inside them, something deeper had shifted. The loneliness that had once wrapped around their hearts like a suffocating frost had melted away, replaced by a tender warmth that neither could deny. Their whispered promises, once fragile and tentative, had blossomed into spoken vows of commitment, not just to each other, but to the future they would build beyond the shadowed past. As they stepped forward, hand in hand, the station behind them seemed to sigh a final breath that carried away the last echoes of winter's chill. The path ahead was unknown, but for the first time, Elara and Kael faced it not as strangers bound by a spectral messenger, but as two souls intertwined by love, hope, and the promise of a thawed heart. The sun climbed higher, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, a canvas of endless possibility. And beneath that vast, awakening sky, Elara and Kael walked on, their steps light, their hearts full ready to embrace the spring that awaited them both. But as they disappeared into the softening landscape, a faint whisper of wind stirred the air, carrying with it the echo of a promise yet to be fulfilled. The snow lay soft and thick around the old railway station, its quiet blanket muffling the sounds of the world beyond. Elara's boots crunched lightly against the fresh powder as she made her way toward the bench where she and Kael had first met under the ghostly light of a spectral moon. The wind whispered through the skeletal trees, carrying a chill that seeped into her bones, but her heart felt curiously warm. Her gaze caught on something delicate and white, tucked gently into the curve of the bench's wooden slat. Kneeling down, she brushed away the snow to reveal a pristine feather, pure white, shimmering faintly as if kissed by moonlight itself. It was unlike any feather she had ever seen, ethereal in its beauty and unblemished by the harshness of winter. A smile tugged at her lips despite the cold. The feather was a remnant of the spectral bird that had accompanied her and Kael through their darkest nights, a symbol of the strange and magical journey they had shared. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up, the softness a stark contrast to the brittle cold of the air. "Kael," she called softly. He appeared from the shadowed archway of the station, his tall frame wrapped in a heavy coat, eyes shining with the same icy blue that had first drawn her in. When Elara held out the feather, he took it with reverence, his gloved fingers barely touching the downy softness. "It's still here," he murmured, voice low and filled with awe. "Like a piece of that night, of everything we've been through." The moment was fragile, as if the world itself held its breath. Kael's gaze met hers, and in that look was 1,000 unspoken words, promises kept, fears faced, and a love forged in the coldest fires of winter. Together they sat on the bench, the feather cradled between them. The sky above was a swirl of pinks and soft oranges, the dawn threatening to wash away the snow, and with it the shadows of the past. But the feather glowed faintly still, a beacon of enduring magic and hope. Elara reached out, her hand brushing Kael's. His fingers closed over hers, warm and steady. "No matter what the future holds," she said, "this will remind us that we faced the darkness and found something beautiful." Kael nodded, his eyes reflecting the soft light of the morning. The bird's message was never just about the curse. It was about us, about the choice to hold on to believe. The feather stirred, as if alive, a soft pulse of light that seemed to beat in time with their hearts. Around them, the winter began to thaw, the snow melting into shimmering pools that mirrored the promise of new beginnings. The station, once a place of isolation and mystery, now felt alive with memory and meaning. The feather was more than a keepsake. It was a talisman of hope, a reminder that even in the coldest winters, love could take flight. As they rose to leave, the feather tucked safely in Elara's coat pocket. The spectral bird's presence lingered in the air, a silent guardian watching over two souls bound together by fate, by whispered promises, and by a love as enduring as the winter itself. "Let's go home," Kael said, his voice steady with newfound resolve. Elara smiled, her heart soaring. Together, and with that, they stepped forward into the dawn, the feathered remnants of their past lighting the path to their future. The fire crackled softly, its warm orange glow casting dancing shadows across the weathered wooden walls of the station shelter. Outside, the snow continued its gentle descent, blanketing the world in quiet white. Elara and Kael sat close together on a narrow bench, the space between them filled with the comforting heat that the cold night had stolen. The spectral bird, silent now, perched on Kael's gloved hand, its faintly luminescent feathers glowing with a light that seemed born from the very heart of winter. Elara's breath formed little clouds in the chilly air as she reached out, her fingers lightly tracing the back of Kael's hand. "Do you remember the first night we met?" she asked softly, her voice barely above the whisper of the wind outside. Kael's amber eyes met hers, reflecting the flickering flames. How could I forget? The snow was falling like a curtain, hiding the world away. And there you were, standing beneath the pale glow of the station lights, as though waiting for something or someone. She smiled, a fragile curve born from the depth of countless unspoken nights. I was waiting to hear the birds call, even if I didn't understand it then. I whispered promises to myself that I didn't yet know how to keep. Kael squeezed her fingers gently. Those whispered promises led us here. They carried us through the frost and the silence, binding our fates together. The bird shifted on his hand, a soft rustle of spectral feathers that seemed to echo their words. It was as if the creature itself bore witness to their journey, a silent guardian of their hearts. Elara looked at it, a flutter of warmth stirring inside her despite the cold that clung to every corner of the station. I was afraid to speak those promises aloud, Elara admitted, her gaze dropping to their intertwined hands. Afraid that saying them would make them fragile, like breaking a delicate thread. But now, I see that speaking them makes them stronger. Kael nodded, his eyes glimmering with emotion. We've walked through shadows and faced silence, but our voices, our vows, are the light that guides us forward. For a long moment, they simply sat there, the world outside hushed beneath the weight of snow and night. Then Kael's voice, low and steady, broke the stillness. Elara, will you stand with me not just here, beneath the winter's watch, but beyond it? Will you promise to face whatever comes as my partner, my equal, and my heart's home? Her breath caught, emotions swirling like a furious blizzard inside her chest. Then, with a clarity born from the depths of everything they had endured, she answered, "Yes, Kael, I promise." The spectral bird lifted its head, releasing a soft, melodious trill that seemed to carry the weight of countless whispered promises fulfilled. It was a song of hope, a hymn to love kindled in the cold and nurtured by trust. As dawn approached, the first pale light bled into the sky, casting gentle hues of pink and gold across the horizon. Elara and Kael rose together, hands still clasped tightly. The snow beneath their feet began to glisten with the promise of thaw, and the station no longer felt a place of solitude, but of beginnings. They stood on the platform, the chill of the morning air mingling with the warmth between them. Kael looked toward the horizon, his voice soft but certain. This is more than a promise now. It's our path. Elara rested her head against his shoulder, heart swelling with a quiet joy, and we'll walk it together. The spectral bird, its mission fulfilled, took flight into the awakening sky, leaving behind a single, delicate feather that drifted slowly to the ground, a talisman of love, fate, and the whispered promises that had become a vow. But as the feather settled in the softening snow, a question lingered in the crisp morning air. How would the world beyond the station receive the love forged in its winter shadows? With their promises kept, Elara and Kael were ready to find out, stepping forward into the light, hand in hand, hearts bound forever by the whispers that had started it all. The days that followed were marked by quiet moments of reflection and growth. Elara found herself returning often to the station, no longer a place of waiting, but a symbol of what they had achieved. Together, they rebuilt the small corners of their lives that had been fractured by fear and isolation. Their whispered promises, once fragile threads in the dark, had woven into a tapestry rich with color and meaning. Kael shared stories of the bird's origins, tales steeped in ancient magic and sacrifice, but always circling back to the heart of their own story. Elara listened, her spirit buoyed by the knowledge that their love was not just a fleeting flame, but a steady beacon. One evening, as snow began to fall once more, Elara and Kael stood beneath the station's canopy, the world hushed and white around them. The air was thick with the scent of pine and frost, the silence punctuated only by the distant whistle of a train. "Do you think the bird ever truly leaves?" Elara asked, her voice a whisper carried on the wind. Kael smiled, his gaze tender. "Perhaps it never needed to. Maybe it was always here in us, in the promises we kept, in the love we found in the winter's heart." Elara leaned into him, her breath mingling with his in the cold air. "Then we carry its song with us, wherever we go." And as the snow settled softly around them, Elara and Kael knew that their journey was just beginning. The promises whispered in the dark had blossomed into a love that would endure, bright and unyielding as the dawn that chased away the longest night. Winter's grip was loosening, though the air still held the sharpness of frost, clinging stubbornly to the edges of the world. At the station where so many of their nights had unfolded, Elara and Kael stood side by side, hands intertwined, gazing out at the delicate emergence of snowdrops pushing through the melting white blanket. The sun, pale but insistent, cast a soft golden glow that warmed their chilled skin, weaving light through the bare branches and painting the platform with a gentle promise. Elara inhaled the crisp air deeply, the scent of damp earth mingling with the faint trace of pine from the nearby woods. Her chestnut hair fluttered lightly in the breeze, and she felt the steady beat of Kael's hand against hers, solid, reassuring, a quiet flame in the lingering cold. "It's almost like the winter itself is thawing," she murmured, her voice a soft exhale carried on the wind. Kael's ice-blue eyes met hers, reflecting the subtle shift in the world around them. "And so are we," he replied, a hint of a smile curving his lips. "Frost and flame." The words hung between them, a delicate balance that had come to define their journey. They had been drawn together through the spectral messenger there, bird that carried whispers and secrets between realms. But now that connection had grown into something tangible, grounded in shared experiences and mutual understanding. Inside the small cabin near the station, the hearth crackled merrily, casting flickering shadows across the wooden walls. The warmth seeped into their bones, a stark contrast to the frozen world outside. Elara sat close to the fire, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, while Kael tended the embers, coaxing them back to life with careful, practiced movements. Their laughter mingled with the soft crackling of the flames, filling the space with a rare, unguarded joy. They spoke of dreams once too fragile to voice aloud, hopes for a future no longer overshadowed by curses or uncertainty. The bird's ghostly presence felt near, though unseen in this sanctuary, as if approving of the harmony they were cultivating. "Do you think the bird would be proud of us?" Elara asked, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. Kael chuckled softly. "I think it's seen worse. But yes, I believe it would be. We've learned to balance the cold and warmth within us, something it has always struggled to do." Outside, the last vestiges of winter clung stubbornly to the landscape, but the promise of spring was undeniable. Elara lifted her hand, revealing the iridescent feather resting in her palm, the spectral bird's gift and symbol of their intertwined fates. It shimmered with colors that shifted subtly in the firelight, a talisman of hope and endurance. She traced the delicate edges with her fingertip, feeling the smoothness beneath her skin. "This journey, it's changed me," she said quietly, "not just because of the curse or the mystery, but because of you, Kael." He reached out, covering her hand with his own, warmth radiating from his touch. "And I, because of you, Elara, we found something, rare balance, acceptance, and love that no curse can extinguish." As dusk fell, The couple stepped outside, the world around them transformed by the dimming light. Lanterns flickered to life along the snow-dusted path leading into the woods, casting a soft glow that illuminated their way. Their footsteps pressed side by side into the fresh snow, a silent testament to the journey they faced together. The air was filled with the fragrance of pine and earth, mingling with the distant calls of winter birds settling in for the night. Elara rested her head lightly on Kael's shoulder, feeling the steady warmth of his presence steady her own. "No matter what comes," she whispered, "we face it as one." Kael nodded, his breath visible in the cool air. Together, always. The spectral bird's feather caught the lantern light, scattering tiny prisms of color across the snow, final reminder of the path they'd walked and the harmony they'd forged in the frost and flame of their shared winter. And as the night deepened, so too did the strength of their bond, a promise of enduring warmth amid the changing seasons to come. The fire's last embers glowed softly as Elara and Kael settled beneath a thick woolen blanket. The world outside quiet, save for the whisper of the wind through bare branches. Their fingers intertwined, they traced the maps of scars and stories on each other's skin, the cold and warmth mingling in their touch like the very essence of their journey. "Do you remember the first night?" Elara asked, voice hushed. Kael's smile was wistful. The birds' call, the snow swirling around us, the sense that something was about to change. "Yes," she breathed. "We were so alone then, and now." Together, their eyes locked, the room filled with a quiet fire that needed no flames. Outside, the last snowdrops bloomed bravely, tiny beacons of resilience and renewal. Inside, two souls warmed by love and acceptance, ready to face whatever dawn awaited beyond the frost. The station stood as a sentinel between seasons, a place where cold met warmth and past met future. Elara and Kael's footprints marked the snowy silent vow etched into the earth that they would walk forward, side by side, into whatever storms or sunshine awaited. The spectral bird's song lingered in the air, a whispered promise of balance, hope, and enduring flame amid the frost. And so, beneath the fading winter sky, their story continued, frost and flame forever entwined. The snow lay thick and untouched across the platform, a pristine blanket that muffled the world into a quiet hush. Above, the sky was a deep velvet, studded with countless stars that glittered like scattered diamonds. Elara's breath came out in soft clouds as she stepped carefully onto the frozen ground, her boots crunching faintly in the stillness. Beside her, Kael moved with a calm certainty, his hand brushing hers in a gentle touch that sent warmth through the chill air. They had returned to the station at midnight, the very place where their story had begun under the pale gaze of a spectral bird and the weight of whispered promises. Where once there had been cold isolation, now there was a sense of home, of memories woven through every creak of the wooden benches and every glimmer of frost along the windows. Elara pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, eyes flickering to the dim station lights that cast a soft glow over the platforms. "It feels different," she murmured, her voice barely above the whispering wind, "like the station remembers us, like it's waiting for us to come back." Kael nodded, his gaze steady and warm. "It's not just the place," he said quietly. "It's us. We've changed it just by being here, by what we've been through." Their footsteps echoed softly as they entered the waiting room, the wooden floor creaking under their weight. The benches, worn smooth by years of travelers, seemed to hold the echoes of their countless conversations, the secrets shared in hushed tones beneath the watchful eyes of the spectral bird. Elara's fingers traced the edge of a bench, her mind drifting back to those long, frosty nights when the birds' soft calls had threaded through the cold air, stitching their hearts together with threads of hope and longing. She remembered the first time she had seen Kael, the strange comfort she had felt despite the chill, and the way the bird had perched silently, as if guarding a fragile promise. Kael caught her gaze and smiled, a slow, genuine curve of lips that reached his eyes. "We came through the frost," he said, "and now we're here, not as strangers, but as something stronger." Outside, a sudden breeze stirred the snow, lifting a single white feather that danced and twirled in the moonlight. It floated towards them, a delicate symbol of all they had endured and all they had yet to become. Elara reached out instinctively, catching the feather in her gloved hand. It was lighter than air, shimmering with an ethereal glow that seemed to pulse with a quiet magic. "A keepsake," she whispered, "from the bird that brought us together." Kael took her hand, their fingers entwining with a tenderness born of shared battles and whispered dreams. The distant whistle of the midnight train echoed faintly, a sound that once had meant uncertainty and fear, but now held promise and new beginnings. They stood together on the platform, surrounded by the silent witness of falling snow and the gentle hum of a world waiting to be reborn. Their eyes met, and in that glance was the unspoken vow to face whatever lay ahead together. The station was no longer a place of solitude and mystery. It was a sanctuary, a testament to the journey from winter's grip to the warmth of love, from whispered promises to spoken vows. And as the first light of dawn colored the horizon, Elara and Kael stepped forward, hand in hand, into a future shaped by hope, trust, and the enduring magic of the spectral messenger. Yet as the train's wheels began to hum faintly in the distance, a subtle stirring in the air hinted that their story was far from over. The station held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold beneath the watchful eyes of the stars and the silent wings of the bird that had changed everything. Elara smiled softly, squeezing Kael's hand, ready for whatever comes next. She asked. He returned her smile with quiet certainty. Always. Together they faced the night, their hearts beating in time with the rhythm of the snowbound station where fate, love, and whispered promises had converged, a place where the past met the future beneath the icy embrace of midnight. The night wrapped the railway station in a quiet hush, the snow outside muffling the usual sounds of the world. Elara stood on the platform, her breath forming pale clouds that drifted away into the cold air. Beside her, Kael's presence was steady, grounding. Above them, the spectral bird perched silently on the iron beam, its translucent feathers shimmering faintly beneath the soft lamplight. It was a silent sentinel, no longer an enigma, but a symbol of their journey and the love that had blossomed amid winter's chill. Elara turned to Kael, her green eyes reflecting the glow of the station lights. "It's strange," she whispered, "how something so quiet can feel so alive, like it's watching over us, not just the station but us always." Kael's gaze softened, the deep blue of his eyes meeting hers with a warmth that belied the cold around them. "It's more than a guardian," he said slowly. "It's a reminder of what we've been through and what we can be now." The bird gave a soft flutter, its ghostly wings stirring the crisp air, leaving a faint trace of frost that shimmered briefly before fading. Elara reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing through the cold space where the bird hovered, feeling the magic and mystery that had first drawn them to this place. Inside the station's waiting room, the fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the frost-lined windows. The room smelled of pine smoke and old wood, comforting contrast to the biting cold outside. Elara and Kael settled into the worn leather bench near the hearth, their hands finding each other in the quiet space between them. "I never thought I'd find warmth here," Elara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just from the fire, but from someone." Kael smiled, a rare and genuine expression that lit up his face. "Neither did I, but maybe the cold was just the beginning, something we had to endure to find what really matters." Their fingers entwined, the pulse of their joined hands a steady rhythm against the backdrop of the crackling fire. The spectral bird's silent watch seemed to fill the room with an invisible comfort, as if the spirit of their journey lingered in every shadow. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, and the bird took flight outside, its wings spreading wide and catching the moonlight as it glided silently over the snow-covered tracks. Elara and Kael rose together, drawn to the window. They watched the bird's graceful arc until it disappeared into the star-speckled sky, carrying with it the last whispers of the curse and the mysteries that had once bound them. "It's like the past is finally letting us go," Kael murmured, "and we can breathe again." Elara nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and hope. No more secrets, no more fear, just us. Hand in hand, they stepped out from the warm glow of the station into the crisp night. Their footsteps crunched softly on the snow as they walked side by side, voices low but certain, weaving promises not of whispered fears but of shared dreams. The cold air was sharp, but their hearts burned bright, a fierce flame against the winter's chill. "Where to now?" Elara asked, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Anywhere," Kael replied, "so long as it's with you." And beneath the silent wings of the spectral bird, they walked forward, loud hearts against the quiet night. No longer strangers bound by mystery, but lovers bound by choice. The station, once a place of isolation and whispered secrets, now stood as a beacon of hope and new beginnings. The bird's watch had ended, but its legacy lived in the love that blossomed beneath the frost and the promise of all the winters yet to come. As they disappeared into the horizon, the wind carried a soft, almost inaudible call, a gentle reminder that some bonds, like the silent wings that guided them, are eternal. The station was quieter than it had been in months. The frost that once clung to the windows had melted away, replaced by the soft shimmer of early spring's promise. Elara wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck, though the chill had softened, and looked across the platform. Kael was already there, his silhouette sharp against the glowing lamplight. The spectral bird perched calmly on his gloved hand. The bird's feathers glistened faintly, catching the light like shards of ice melting in the warmth. Their eyes met, and a small smile played on Kael's lips. Elara's heart fluttered, not from the cold, but from the quiet certainty that had grown between them over these long winter nights. No longer strangers bound by mystery and whispered promises, they had become something more delicate and unbreakable. She stepped forward, her boots crunching in the fresh snow, and sat beside him on the wooden bench. The cold seeped into her fingers despite the gloves, but Kael reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, grounding her, and the spectral bird let out a soft, haunting call that seemed to echo the beating of their hearts. "Do you remember the first night you came here?" Elara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kael nodded, eyes reflecting the pale moonlight. "I thought I was alone, but then you appeared. The bird called, and everything changed." Elara smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "We were both waiting, weren't we? Waiting for something neither of us understood. And now?" Kael asked, turning toward her with an earnest expression. "Now, we're waiting for the future we can build together. No more ghosts, no more curses, just us." He reached out, taking her hand in his. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had always belonged together. The bird fluttered its wings softly, leaving a faint shimmer of frost in the air, a reminder of the winter that had brought them together, now slowly fading away. They rose and wandered beneath the frost-kissed trees lining the station, their breath mingling in the crisp air. Elara traced patterns in the fresh snow with her gloved hand, and Kael joined in, sketching a path that led toward an unspoken future. Their whispered words floated like snowflakes around them, promises not just to return, but to stay, to grow, to love. As the night deepened, the spectral bird took flight, circling above them before disappearing into the star-studded sky. It had fulfilled its purpose, leaving behind a single, delicate feather that drifted down to rest at their feet. Elara picked it up, holding it carefully. "A reminder," she said softly. Kael smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling, "of where we started and where we're going." Together, they stood at the edge of the platform, the first hints of dawn painting the horizon in soft pinks and golds. The snow beneath their feet began to melt, the ice giving way to the promise of spring, a mirror to the thawing of their own hearts. Hand in hand, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever awaited beyond the station. Their whispered forever now, spoken aloud. But just as the sun's rays began to warm the earth, a faint, distant melody drifted on the breeze, the bird's song, soft and lingering, a final blessing on a story born in winter's embrace, now blossoming into endless possibility. And as the light grew, so did their hope. Elara's boots crunched softly against the freshly fallen snow as she stepped off the last train before midnight. The air was sharp and cold, biting at the edges of her wool coat and sending icy tendrils curling beneath her scarf. Her breath billowed in small, hurried puffs, swirling into the stillness of the snowbound station. The platform stretched ahead, deserted and silent except for the occasional whisper of wind that danced through the lampposts, flickering their pale light upon the frost-coated rails. She pulled her coat tighter around her, the weight of the day's loneliness pressing against her chest like the heavy snowflakes settling on the ground. The station, so often bustling with life, now seemed suspended in a frozen moment, caught between worlds. Elara's eyes scanned the shadows, searching for something she couldn't quite name, a sign, a presence, a purpose. And then she saw him. A figure stood near the far end of the platform, his silhouette etched sharply against the dim glow of the station's lanterns. He was tall and lean, cloaked in a dark overcoat that seemed to swallow the light. His face was partially obscured by a scarf wrapped snugly around his neck, but his eyes, bright and piercing, caught the fleeting moonlight as they landed on her. Perched silently on his gloved hand was a bird, unlike any Elara had ever seen. It shimmered with an ethereal glow, feathers translucent and tinged with frost, as if woven from the very essence of winter itself. The bird's eyes gleamed softly, and it tilted its head toward Elara, letting out a low, haunting call that echoed through the quiet night. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The cold wind stilled, as if waiting for what would come next. Elara's heart quickened, a strange warmth blossoming despite the chill. She felt drawn to the stranger and his spectral companion, an invisible thread pulling them together across the empty platform. Kael's gaze held hers, steady and unyielding, filled with secrets and sorrow. It was a look that promised stories, untold, and fates intertwined. Without a word, Elara understood that this meeting was no accident. The bird called again, a soft, melodic whisper that seemed to carry a message just beyond her grasp. Elara swallowed hard, the weight of the moment settling deep within her. She stepped forward, her voice barely audible over the whispering wind. "I'll come back," she promised, her words a fragile pledge carried on the frosty air. Kael inclined his head slightly, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. The bird fluttered its ghostly wings, scattering a delicate shimmer of frost that sparkled like tiny stars in the night. As the clock's hands edged toward midnight, Elara turned away from the stranger and the spectral bird, her mind racing with questions and a burgeoning hope. The station, once cold and empty, now held the promise of something extraordinary, a story written in snow and whispered under the cloak of winter's night. She would return, and when she did, everything would change.